Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Just a Person podcast, a show that explores life's highs, lows, and in-betweens. I'm Madison, and this week I sat down with Dawn for part 2 of her journey through infertility treatment. We discussed her ongoing experience with IVF, the toll it took on her physical and mental health, and what it was like finally becoming pregnant. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the episode. Hello, Dawn.
Hello.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you are here under very exciting circumstances, which we're going to get to in a second, but first we're going to do our question for the day, our random question.
Okay.
The question is, if you could be the first person, like the person to do something for the first time, which I don't really know how to explain that better. We'll explain it with our answers, but you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay, so what would you pick?
I would say I would want to be the first person up in an airplane to experience what it's like to see the world from that point of view. I don't necessarily need to fly it. I could just be the first passenger going along and just taking flight. Like, I think that would be pretty cool to be the first person who ever did that.
Now, are we talking like in an old, like the original airplane, or like a modern metal safer airplane?
No, give me the original. Because I'm gonna be the first one. It's gotta be very unsafe. Yes.
Yeah, that would be like, it'd be like being on a roller coaster. It's like absolutely terrifying, but also really fun.
Right. It would be. And then once you're up there and going, then you're comfortable until you decide to come back down. Then
right. And then you're like,
again.
No one's ever landed one of these before.
Right. See how this goes.
That's a good one. That would be really fun and also really scary. I like that.
All right, what's yours?
Mine is, I would want to be the first person in space. I've always had like a real fascination with space, and so I think to be able to be I don't think I would ever, when I was little I wanted to be an astronaut, but I don't think I would ever do it now, like go into space.
So if there's like life on space, you're not signing up to go live there?
No. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I used to want to go to space. I don't now. But I would want to be the first person to see the Earth. Like, before there were pictures, before there's anything, some guy just went up there and just saw outer space. And I think that'd be really cool. Like, I can't even imagine what that was like for that guy.
No, me either. Look at us both flying.
Yeah,
just flying a little further.
Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to your exciting news. You were here before, season 1. If you have not listened to that, I would definitely recommend listening to it before the conversation we're going to have now, because it may not make that much sense if you don't have all that background information. But basically, you were having trouble getting pregnant. You weren't necessarily infertile. No one really knew what was going on. We ended that. You had 2 rounds of IVF left, and you said, I will come back if I get pregnant. And yes, here we are 2 years later, and you're
spoiler.
And you're finally pregnant. It has been 2 almost full years since then.
Since that podcast.
But here we are. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You told my cousin Katie had a baby a few weeks ago. You'll catch that later in the season. But yeah, you told us a few weeks ago, and I was like, yeah. I've been like, I think about every once in a while it comes to my mind, and I'm like, I wonder how Dawn's doing, because I've been waiting, just like you.
To hear the rest of the story.
I'm so excited. What are your first thoughts about that?
About being pregnant?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's a little overwhelming. It still almost feels like too good to be true type of a situation. The last round, which we'll talk about all of that, I did go into it with a much more confident mindset, and it was kind of a weird situation where I knew it was going to work this time compared to all the other times. So I was very positive the whole time, whereas my husband was more skeptical. We like swapped positions because he was always the more like everything's gonna be great, it's gonna work. And I was more like, no, it's not working, not working. So for me though, I feel like the day they put it in, I just knew it was going to work. So it was kind of a crazy mind switch for myself, which thank God. I was in a dark place for a while there. So it's good to be on the other side. And yeah, we're 13 weeks. So up to the point where we're confident and how we're feeling and can share the news. And it's been great. I haven't been sick or anything. So that's wonderful. Yeah.
And what better way to tell people than to go on a podcast, do a press
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's part of it is the emotional side of everything. It feels like there's been so much that has happened. Just putting out like a social media post that says like we're pregnant, it just didn't feel like enough because I'm like,
Yeah.
there's just been so much, and I just felt like I needed to share more. So thanks for having me back on to.
Yeah, I'll say, like, you're always happy for people when they're pregnant, of course. But when you said you were pregnant, that was the first time I think I've ever been like, yeah, like, yes.
Right. And I think there's been so many people like that in our lives. I mean, we've been trying for 6 years, so I can't even. I feel like there's probably 100 people who have been praying for us, and we are so grateful for those amazing people out there who care and ask and are so sweet. So we're excited to tell everybody.
It's like a group victory.
Right, it really is. And you know me, overshare.
Right.
So anytime anyone would ask, I'm telling. And so a lot of people knew what's going on and what's happening. So I think to finally have success feels good for everybody.
Well, let's just get right into it. So we ended with you had those 2 chances left with IVF. So what happened?
Right. Okay. So yes, at that point we had 5 embryos left. So 5 frozen embryos from our first IVF retrieval. I still had hope, there was the first 2 didn't work. It was like, oh gosh, but the plan was to transfer 2 and then transfer the last 3. So we are thinking we are going to have 2 more transfers to go. Still had hope, but it was starting to kind of play a toll on my emotions. I'll say that. So I did start going to actually see a therapist at that point. I know on the last podcast I mentioned I went once. Now I actually found a therapist who had been through IVF herself. So she knew the experience and could speak to me. And my gosh, she was a game changer for me these last 2 years. Like I said, I like to talk. I like to rationalize. I am very much a person who likes a plan, which you can't have plans with IVF, which you'll hear. But she just helped me process everything that we were going through. So that was a great start. So with every transfer, they would change up what they were doing. So add in a different type of medication or another type of shot, and just some study somewhere said to do this. So we would throw it in. So for that next transfer, we added in a blood thinner shot, and we had done that mock transfer to see if my progesterone levels were where they should be. So before we went to do the transfer, we did what's called a sonohystogram, because I always had that fibroid that would grow on my uterine lining. So what a sonohystogram is they insert a catheter and they fill your uterus with fluid. So then they can do an ultrasound and see the lining more clearly. When they did that, they found out again that this fibroid had grown back. So we scheduled the 3rd fibroid removal surgery at that point. To explain how they do that surgery, they use this tool called a myosure. And this is how they explained it to me. Think of a Pac-Man. So it just comes in and it like chomp, 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 and munches away at this fibroid that's growing in your lining. So then it's flat and flush. So then when you go to transfer and you're building your lining up, the embryo will want to stick. But it has to get rid of that fibroid that's in the way and can give off hormones and stuff to make it not successful.
Was that a reassuring analogy for you, or was that just like, okay?
um it kind of made sense to me, the munching back. But as time goes on, we learn it's hindsight 2020. That's probably the most frustrating part. We learn that that isn't the best route for me. With other people who are in this situation, they have it, they do the surgery, it goes away, the fibroid's gone. Obviously, for me, it keeps growing back.
Wait, this surgery is supposed to get rid of it forever, but you've had it 3 times, or this is new?
No, it's the same fibroid that just keeps growing. So every time we do,
No, I'm sorry. Is this surgery is the same thing you keep having with the munching thing,
yes,
but it keeps growing back, but it's
correct,
supposed to get rid of it.
correct. But mine just keeps growing back because every time I do the drugs with the transfers or retrievals or whatever it is, it grows. I analogy it to like a weed. Like every time they're going in, they're not getting the root, they're just pulling off the top of the weed.
Oh, and they didn't know they weren't getting the root?
Well, every time they do this surgery, for most people, it works. And I'm the exception. It didn't
Awesome.
work. Yes. So yes, we do that surgery, and then we went and transferred embryos number 3 and 4.
And how long is it between the surgery and the transfer?
Just that next cycle, so the next month.
Okay, I didn't know if there's like a long recovery period or anything like that, or if it's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's pretty quick for those. I mean, that one's you do go under anesthesia for it, but it's a pretty quick retrieval. Like it's a day and you kind of feel better. You just feel a little crampy and then you have some like bleeding, but nothing too crazy for those. And those were just done in the fertility clinic office. So like their doctors did those for me. So then we transferred the 3rd and the 4th embryo, and once again, it didn't work. I'm just feeling defeated at this point, exhausted, after so many surgeries and all these transfers and just failed hope. And it's just exhausting. Thank God for therapy.
If you think about it, you're living it, but like from the outside looking at this, like you've been doing this for years, trying to have a kid, you keep being let down. You've been taking all these hormones, these medicine, like all this stuff for this amount of time, and now you're at your last chance. So it's like all of that on you. Plus you're just like out there living your everyday life, like regular stressors, and now you have all of this on top of it.
Right. And the amount of appointments and blood draws, you have to plan your life around these events because you can't be gone, or you're like, I can't even tell you how many weddings we've snuck into the car back seat and he's just giving me a shot in the back seat of the car because it's like, we got to do this at 8 p.m. So we just got to do it. I'm carrying my cooler with my drugs. Like,
I didn't know where that was about to go.
you would think it'd be more fun, but no, just a shot.
You're like in public every day. And they hurt, I'm sure. And that's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't feel great. So yeah. So then now it's like a cycle for us, right? And now it's because every time we do any drugs, that fibroid grows back. So now it's a pattern. So ultrasound. Oh, we think we see the fibroid. Let's do a sonohystogram. Confirm there's a fibroid. All right, schedule another fibroid removal surgery. So now that's my 4th one that I'm going into, and then we can transfer the embryos. So
nobody during this time is thinking, why does this keep growing back?
Right. And that's the question that we keep asking.
And they can't figure, like you're asking, or they just can't, like they're asking it too, and they just can't figure it out.
So what I've learned since it's now working, and my doctor told me, she said, and if I had 1,000 patients that had a uterine fibroid on their lining, we would do the MyoSure surgery and 999 of them would be good. We were the one that it didn't. So in their treatment and their typical plans, it's you do this surgery and that's the course of treatment. There wasn't really anything else. And also, I mean, hindsight, right? I probably I wish I would have pushed further and said more and did more, but you don't know. Your doctors just tell you this is what you do, and so you do it.
I mean, yeah, you're not a doctor. How would you know what they're supposed to be doing? Yeah.
Exactly. And at this point, I am so emotionally drained. Like, I just want to get it done, which sounds horrible, but it's just been, such a big part of my life for so long. And I'm just exhausted at that point.
Now, that wasn't too long after we put out your episode, was it? Because I feel like I remember either shortly after your episode came out or when it came out, you had told me that that one didn't work.
I think that first transfer with that embryos 3 and 4 was right after. And then we did the embryos 5 and 6, probably 4 months after that, I would guess.
Okay, so before that one, did you have anything, any fibroids, anything like that?
Yep, it would always grow back.
Okay, every time it did. Okay.
Every time it did.
Great.
It would just keep growing back.
Just more surgeries.
Yep. And, that's when it came down to like, why isn't this working? They pretty much just said it has to be this fibroid. Like, we don't know what else. But they, like, the last transfer, they put me on Claritin and Pepsid. I don't know why, but apparently there is some study that proved that those two things would help. Oh, and baby aspirin. So I started taking those too. So every night I had like 12 pills and different drugs that I was like throwing like in my body. I hope this doesn't have long-term effects.
You're right. You're right.
We'll find out.
You're taking like the most random assortment of pills.
Yes, just so much. It was crazy. So we go in to do this transfer, so the third transfer, and it was supposed to be our last 3 embryos. So 5, 6, and 7, because number 7 wasn't that strong of a grade. So they're like, yep, we'll put all 3 in because the chances that you get 3 is very, very low. Okay. So we're going in. We're like, I'm in the room, legs in stirrup, and they come out and show you the pictures of the embryos, and there's only 2. And I was like, well, no, we're supposed to have 3. They were like, oh, sorry, miscommunication. So that was frustrating because in my mind, I'd already gone through 2 failed transfers, could be a 3rd failed transfer. Now you want me to do this again. Like, I don't know if I emotionally can handle this. And with our lowest grade embryo, and I'm probably gonna have to have another surgery. Like, I was so mad. And like, that's not the feeling that you should have going into putting embryos into your body.
Yeah. That's not how you want to, become pregnant, is just being furious.
Right. But I was so frustrated that happened. And I was like, of course that happened. You know what I mean? Just, pity me, poor Don. Like,
they just want to keep me here forever.
I know. And that is kind of how it felt. But yep. So they put the 2 in, and 10 days later, find out it didn't work. So now we've gone through 6 embryos, 3 failed IVF transfers. So that was a lot. And at this point, I'm just done. I was so mentally checked out. I was like, it's not going to work. I'm not going to be a mother. Let's move on. Like,
Are you still going to therapy at this time as well?
Yes, definitely. Quite a bit. Yeah. So then, but I knew that we still needed to do this 1 embryo, right? Like, I couldn't just have it sitting out there and froze forever. And so I just wanted to get it done. Like, next month, put it in. I don't even care if I have a fibroid growing. Just do it. I'm exhausted. Chances it'll work are low anyway. So why are we doing this? I went in to do another ultrasound because they always make you do them. And my doctor came in afterwards, and she was like, nope, stop. We're not transferring this embryo. I need you to go see a fibroid specialist. And I was like, that's a thing? Like, why didn't you tell me about this 4 surgeries ago? Like,
yeah, you'd think after like it happened, after it came back, they would have been like, oh, this is weird.
Right.
We should see what's going on.
Oh, so I was mad again. Like, such an emotional roller coaster.
Another doctor, another appointment.
Yes. And I was like, why didn't you even tell me that this is an option? So as it turns out, typically a uterine fibroid specialist is removing like large fibroids that people have, like these huge masses inside their uterus or uterine cavity or wherever they are. They're going after these big, huge ones. And my doctor's like, I don't even know if she will agree to do this surgery because my fibroid's like the size of a peanut. Okay. So I want you to imagine how tiny that is. It's just this very tiny little peanut size thing. So she normally wouldn't even consider doing that type of a surgery. But we did meet with her. Before that, I got an MRI done so they could see more images of it and the doctor could really view where it was and what was happening. She did agree to do the surgery. So going into it, we were going to try and get it vaginally. But if she needed to, so we had to prepare for the option of her having to go in like a C-section and come in through the top of the uterus. Kind of how we talked about like getting the root. That was like her goal. She's like, I'm going to get the root of this thing. So if I can't get it all vaginally, I'm going to go in from the top, which that has its own risks because now you're cutting into the uterus. So
and it's like a major surgery.
Major surgery, yeah. I mean, this one was in the hospital. This one was quite a bit bigger process. But what she uses instead of the Pac-Man MyoSure, she used a hot wire. So she went in and like scooped it out more
Wow.
than chomped it out. Yep. So thank goodness she was able to get it all vaginally. I didn't have to have the C-section surgery type thing to get at it. I remember though going into that surgery and just being like, please do the C-section because I want to know that you get this thing. Like, I don't want to come back. I don't want to do this again. And I remember waking up from surgery and like feeling, and I was so upset.
They didn't give you a C-section.
Yes. And like because in my mind, I was like, it's just going to come back. Like, that's all I've had experienced. So I thought for sure, I was like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You know how that goes. But my sweet, sweet husband has a video. So I was like, record when she talks to you so I can like hear what she says and understand it. And so we've got it on video, on tape, and she's like, I got it all. I promise it's all gone. And the way she explained it is that where this fibroid was sitting at the top of my uterus is exactly where they put in IUDs.
Mm.
So if you didn't want to get pregnant, they would place an IUD right where that fibroid is sitting.
Interesting.
Yeah. So she's like, I've had a built-in IUD pretty much my whole life with this.
Yeah, because you said that you guys had done all these tests and nothing was wrong.
Right.
Which was the confusing thing because they wouldn't tell you that you were infertile because you weren't.
Right. Everything was working.
And so you couldn't figure it. Wow, that's great. Had that lady ever seen that before, that doctor?
She said she never removed that small of a fibroid before. We were the exception again.
And do people usually get them like specifically in that place? Is that what was unique about it? It was in like this particular place?
So typically when an embryo attaches, it attaches there. The craziest thing. So when we had our 8-week ultrasound with my favorite ultrasound tech, so she had been with me through the whole journey.
Like you have a favorite ultrasound tech.
I do.
Crazy.
She was great. Because she was always the one who'd be like, there it is, it's back. Like and so, but when we did the ultrasound and saw the baby, she was like, breaker news. He is attached. Spoiler. We'll tell that in a minute too.
Okay.
He's attached exactly where that fibroid sat.
Wow.
Like right there. So it's crazy that tiny little peanut messed us up for that many years.
Does that give you like some sort of relief though in a weird way? Because I remember in the first one you were saying that you were having such a hard time because you felt like something was wrong with you, but like nothing was wrong with you. Just this particular thing was in this particular place where you needed it to not be.
Right. Yes, that does help.
I mean, you still obviously you went through so many things. Like, I'm not trying to discredit that, but
No.
is that
I
just
get what
like
you're
the
saying.
teeniest bit of relief? Like, oh, nothing's wrong with me. It was just this one thing we weren't catching.
Right. Yes, it really does because I couldn't have done anything differently. And I feel like I did advocate for myself quite a bit. I wish I would have done it earlier, but you don't know what you don't know. But no, it was very, like I said in the beginning, I just felt good and felt like it's going to work. And I think once I found out that thing was gone, and I had a few ultrasounds like months later to prove that it truly was gone and not coming back, then I was like, okay, there's no reason this shouldn't work. Like, it can work now. Like,
yeah. So because before the last time, you obviously would have done all those, like all the drugs and things like that again to ramp up for it. And once it didn't come back, you were like, yes, this is gonna work now.
Yes.
So you're going in for your last transfer, your last chance, but you're feeling pretty good. So what happened?
So we are going into it, but I feel good about my uterus, but I don't necessarily feel great because now it's our lowest grade embryo, right?
So I wait, I've got a quick question before you talk about it. So could you then do this whole thing, like if you wanted to, do IVF, like start all over again, or do they usually just do it one whole whatever?
Yeah. So that's your foreshadowing. Yes,
Okay,
we
okay,
do.
go ahead.
I love it. So we go in and we transfer that last embryo, and we find out 10 days later it doesn't work. I'm at this point completely defeated because I'm like, we did the surgery, we know there isn't a fibroid, we transfer an embryo, it doesn't work. I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this again. I felt extremely, I think defeated is the best way to put it. But there was also this wave of relief that I semi felt too, because I was like, we can move on. Like, I don't have to keep doing this anymore. Like,
And you said in the first interview that we did that you just wanted to like make sure you tried everything no matter what happened. And I'm obviously it's disappointing, but at least you tried.
right. Yes. And I was ready to be completely done or start adoption. We started looking into that as an option again. Even my husband started looking to surrogacy to see, like, is that an option? Just start looking at different routes because, you know, in my mind, I'm like, my body can't do this clearly. Like, it's just not going to work, which that was a lot of therapy to talk through that and come to terms with that and what that looks like. But so to just really throw a crazy wrench into everything, after that had failed, it was probably a little bit TMI, but normally after you do transfers, because you're doing progesterone shots to thicken your lining of your uterus. So if you have a failed transfer, you stop those progesterone shots, but you've been putting them in your body for about 2 weeks now and thickening your lining. So now that period after a transfer is usually horrible because you work to thicken it so much and then now you have to shed it all, and it's usually just a horrible experience from what I'd had. So now this fourth time doing it, and my period wasn't really bad, like it was kind of just like a normal one, but it was lasting like 8 days, which was odd for me. That's normally not that long. Lots of spotting just going on for a long time. I was like, that's weird. I started like feeling crampy, and I was like, why do I feel like this? Like my past experiences, I'd never had that. So I don't understand what's going on. So then I decided, I'm just going to take a pregnancy test and just see what happens. And sure enough, I was pregnant.
Okay.
I know, right? So when I had done the blood test after the transfer, 10 days after, it was a 4, and you need it to be a 5 to be considered pregnant. And that's like the lowest it can be, is to be a 5. Like that's really low. Like, for example, when we got pregnant this time, it was 210, I believe, was my first number. So even just having a 5 would be like, So getting a 4, that's pretty, you can say, no, you're not pregnant. Well, what they think happened was during the time of the transfer, we had sex naturally at the same time, like where it all falls in. So they believe what happened is we got pregnant naturally, but it was like 2 days or 3 days older than the embryo they implanted. So when I got the blood test done, it was too early to truly measure that baby, the natural baby.
Uh-huh. Wow, that's so weird.
Talk about roller coaster, right?
Yeah,
Like I am
whoa.
ready to be done. I'm never doing this, and then find out I'm pregnant.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. So that was like it was like a Wednesday night that we tested that. And then you had to go back on Saturday. Well, so I got the blood test on Thursday, and I had to go back on Saturday, and they want that number to double so they know that the baby's growing. And so for me, it went down. So now I had miscarried.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It was surreal. It was crazy. That kind of messed me up more than just having a negative, because now all of a sudden there's like hope, because I'm like, I did get pregnant. I didn't get pregnant from that embryo, but I got pregnant naturally.
And that had never happened before.
Never happened. That was the first positive we'd ever had through any, all the years of trying. So it was kind of just a weird time in life. I didn't understand it because then I was processing with the fact that like I could get pregnant, but now am I just going to miscarry every time? Am I now not able to carry, but now I can just keep having positives and losing? So geez, it was a lot to deal with. And I still wasn't totally convinced. You know, I was like, it was a fluke. Like I still didn't really understand it.
So are you still going to your doctor then for
Yeah,
all
so
these?
we met
Okay.
with her and she, you know, she is the fighter. She's kept always saying, there's a baby here. Like we just gotta keep trying. And I was so withdrawn at that point and just upset and not happy. And, you know, at that point, she recommended that we do 2 more rounds of IVF with genetic testing and then transfer these, like, and keep watching to see if my fibroid goes back. But her point, so I was 34 at that time. You know, 34 is considered getting up there in the age of childbearing nowadays. Like when I birth this, I will be a geriatric, so high risk,
Gosh.
which is fun. But we had tried, I think, 2 months on our own after this miscarriage, just to see if maybe we can get pregnant naturally on our own, and it didn't work, and it didn't work. And so that was super, like just in 2 months, the emotional toll that that took on me. Like my doctor, she's like, I don't think that you can do this much longer. Like your ability to go through this, you know, your string is very short. And like, and she also explained that if we did those retrievals at 34, now we're freezing 34-year-old eggs. She's like, I don't want you to come back in 2, 3, 4 years and go, I want to try again. She's like, because now you're older, your egg reserve's less, it's going to be harder. She's like, so she really wants you to think about it, doing this and going this extra route. So lots of conversations between me and my husband on what do we want to do, where do we want to go. It was a hard decision, but we did come to the decision that we were going to do it and we were going to try again. I did set expectations that like I can't be happy, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and act like this is the best time of my life. I'm so excited. I was like, I just know that like this is going to be a lot. I really did withdraw from a lot of people just because I was in survival mode for these 2 retrievals. I was like, I just need to get through it. I'll get through it and we'll do it. It's just don't expect a lot from me.
Yeah, that's fair.
We did that last fall. So our first one was in October. When I thought that I did a lot of drugs the first time for the IVF retrieval, they about tripled what I had.
Oh my gosh.
There was a lot of drugs going in because when you do genetic testing, what they do is they're growing them to what they call blast, which is over 100 cells. So usually 5 to 6 days they grow. And then they take 5 cells out of the outside, which is really that like the embryonic sac. So they take the 5 cells out of there and then they genetically test those. We did our second retrieval. We ended up with 2 day 5 genetically good embryos from that retrieval. The interesting thing is, I gotta pull up my notes so I remember exactly because there's so many numbers. But from that retrieval, we had started out with 13 eggs and we got 11 embryos. And then as of day 3 growth, which is where we stopped last time, where we had the 7, we had 10 that were alive. And then by day 5 growth, we only had 2. A lot of them didn't make it to that day 5, which is another reason why we're having a hard time getting pregnant.
And you didn't do that the last time? You just went to day 3.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, because I remember you said you had to like get your body ready as though it was the day 3. So that way when they put them in there, it's like you're at the same spot.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And is day 5 the furthest that they go?
Yeah. Well, they technically, I think one of them grew till day 5, one grew till day 6. So it just depends on how many days it needs to get to that blast stage so that they can pull the cells and genetically test them. After that retrieval, I was overstimulated, ended up in the emergency room,
Perfect.
which was great. I'm not a puker just in general. And that night, I think I puked more than I have in my whole life. It was extremely painful.
Were you just throwing up from pain?
Yeah, it felt like, obviously I've never had labor, but I'm pretty sure this is what contractions felt like because it was like every 5 minutes I would just get these unbelievable like cramps in my stomach. And at first it was like not a big deal, but then it got to the point where like I was puking because it hurt so bad. Finally went to the ER and I had two doses of morphine, I think they
Oh
gave me.
my
Like it was so
God.
much. We had an ultrasound, we had a CAT scan, and I was just overstimulated. Like there was too much going on in there. My body couldn't take it. So that was fun. And then literally 2 weeks later, I had to start again to do another IVF retrieval. So when I said I was withdrawn and like it's survival mode, it was just because it was a lot to go through that. So then third retrieval happens. That time we got 16 eggs and 12 of them became embryos. 12 of them survived to day 3 again, but then only 3 of them survived to day 5. So when you look at the numbers, like we had 29 embryos, but only 5 of them survived to day 5. So like when you take that and then pair it with our fibroid, like our chances were 0% that we were going to get pregnant naturally.
I don't mean this in like any type of mean way, but was it just because you were getting older that it was so like that part was so difficult of them surviving?
It could be. When you really look at the numbers, it's fascinating that we are all here because it's really not that easy. But they do say a lot of times with genetic testing, when you're growing that far, when you have your embryos and then you can like cut it in half, however many will make it, and then cut it in half again for how many will pass genetic testing. So it is normal to get less, but that is quite a bit less. And we had the 3 that made it to day 5 or blast. And so those 3 got genetic tested. 2 of them were good. The third one was missing the second 15th chromosome, which is kind of neat. Like, and apparently they wouldn't survive missing. Like if you were to transfer it, it wouldn't survive. So
Isn't that crazy they can do that and figure
it's
that out?
fascinating. I find it crazy. Like it's just so yeah, so we had 4 embryos that were genetically good and ready to go and get transferred. And so I was feeling, like I said, the most positive I've ever felt. So I'm like, we've had like 4 ultrasounds to make sure this fibroid's gone. We did another sonohistogram to make sure nothing's in there that shouldn't be. We had 4 genetically good embryos. I'm like, this is gonna work.
Was it almost like this is a new chance now because the fibroid's not here and like that was the main problem?
Yes, yes. And I think for me, I couldn't just keep blindly trying anymore. And so like I looking back, it was a very hard decision to do the retrievals and the genetic testing. But I'm really glad that we did because I've gotten so many answers to understand that out of those 7 embryos we transferred before, maybe one of them would have made it on their own, right? So even if there wasn't a fibroid messing with it, maybe just one of them probably would have been genetically viable. It just helped me to process and understand, it's not anything I'm doing. Like it's just the makeup and how our babies are made, I guess, and how it works. All right, so we're almost done. I told you. I warned you, it's a long story.
I mean, it's been 2 years, so there's a lot to go through.
Yeah. So we did go into that transfer with the one. And the fun thing with genetic testing is that we do get to know the XY chromosomes. So genetically, what are they? Which I did already kind of spoil it. So when we put this embryo in, we already knew it was a boy. So that was kind of a fun little thing that not many people get to know. So from, day, I think he was 5 years old or 5 days old. So from day 5, we knew what he was, which is it's kind of it's like a little perk, I guess you could call it. And I am not a person who wants to wait and do surprises, not into those. So no matter what, we would have found out. But yeah, it was kind of fun doing that.
Was this your first time then with this round or this batch?
Yep. Our first transfer, they'd only let us put one in because when it's genetically tested, it has a higher chances. Now you're more at like 80% chance of success. So they would only let us put a one in. So yeah, they transferred him and but felt very positive, felt very good. I was like, this is gonna work. We did the Well, the blood test was scheduled for a Monday. I got super anxious. At church, they did a sermon that just really like I was crying in church because I thought it was a sign from
Oh
God that it
no.
wasn't going to work. Turned into this whole thing. It was about how to pray in difficult situations. I was like, okay, well, this is a sign. That worked. I was a mess. And like it was so embarrassing. So then that whole afternoon at home, I was just this anxious mess. And I'm like, all right, if I feel this way, what is tonight versus tomorrow morning? I'm going to take a test. And so I just went in the bathroom and peed on a stick and then got in the shower so I wouldn't look at it. Like, and then I came out and yeah, it was showing positive. And I was like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it was such a beautiful moment because I could come out, I could tell Casey, we could be like in that happy moment together. And it wasn't like a nurse calling me on the phone telling me, right? Like I'm glad we did that. Other times I would wait and just let them give me the result, but I'm really glad that we tested at home ourselves and got to have that moment. And so then the next morning it was just like, yep, tell me the number. Like it's fine. Like, we know we're pregnant. Like it was awesome.
I can't even imagine that most people would be able to do that for that long.
It was a lot, and I like to like think back and go, what was the point of all of this? Like, why me? Why did I have to go through this? What was it? And we went in for our 6-week ultrasound and everything looked great. And afterwards we met with our doctor who we had been consulting with these last 4 years, and she had told us that she was going down to part-time. She told us like a month earlier. She has children. She wants to spend more time with them. So she was just going to do procedures, not really meet with clients so much. And that she was going to start writing a book. And she told us that she's going to highlight like 8 to 9 of her most complicated cases and talk through them and do it from, the doctor's viewpoint and, the patient's viewpoint and where it goes. And that's when she told us about the uterine fibroids that 99% of them can just get taken care of with a MyoSure. And, we were the exception. And so I kind of think like I had to go through this to just maybe change the course of treatment when it comes to uterine fibroids. If we're going to be featured in a book that talks about our case and different ways to treat something, maybe that was the point of all of it. Like,
Yeah, open people's eyes a little bit more to something else that could be like things are not always just the same for everybody.
right. And if you think about infertility treatments haven't been around for that long. So I think, a lot of times they're just kind of throwing a dart and hoping it sticks with what they're doing. I'm hoping that what I've gone through can help other people just to learn about fibroids and what's out there. And I think it'll be interesting to see her book when she puts it out. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, you'll have to have a book signing.
Gosh, I don't know about that, but it was kind of a neat, and she was super, I mean, she had tears in her eyes. Like she was extremely happy too that we finally got here. And, and the beautiful thing is we have 3 more that are out there and frozen. And so there's hope that, we can build like a big family eventually. And it feels hopeful at this time, but it's been a journey. That's for sure.
And you said that like what is the purpose and like hopefully this book will help people and I'm sure that it will. But also you said to me when you you were with my family, you were just telling me, but you said that you were pregnant, that so many people since your episode came out have like reached out to you or just talked to you about it. And I think that too, like outside of the book, but like just telling your story that other people can relate to. And it was hard for you, obviously. So them being like, oh, I'm not alone. Like maybe they're not going to talk to you about it, but like they can listen to what you're saying and be like, I'm not the only person that's going through this.
Yeah, it does need to be talked about more. It's so common and it should be shared because there's so many women that are going through it all the time and it's just becoming more prevalent. I do think it is something that we need to open that conversation and I understand if people don't want to share like I do, right? Like
Right.
that's totally up to you. But I think it should be a topic of conversation nowadays. It's just so prevalent.
Yeah. And I told you your episode remains the most popular since it's been out. So
Let's see if we can beat that. Send us enough.
people are seeking out this type of conversation, and like they need to hear from someone like you. I mean, especially now when this comes out, like that even though it's taken you 6 years and it's been incredibly hard, and sometimes you're still like, why did I do this? But like there is hope, and at the end of this, like you're gonna have a kid, which is all that you wanted this entire time.
And I want to point out, we are the exception, right? Like, I very much have learned that. I've had so many friends that have gone through infertility, and it works right away, and just IVF and transfer, or an IUI, and it works. And so, yeah, if you're considering it, don't be afraid. I do want to point out, the price tag on this is ridiculous, and it's hard. And I'm extremely grateful that we could even do this process and even have this option. And I understand that someone might be listening and going, I can't even fathom going through that. So I feel for that, and I hear it. And it's hopefully someday there is coverage for this type of treatment, because it is a lot of money to give you something that you just want so badly that you have no control over. It's a tough process to go through.
Are there any big like lessons that you've taken out of this?
Yeah, so this is kind of crazy. So after my last shot, because after you do get pregnant, you still have to do those progesterone shots for 12 weeks. And I had to do the blood thinner shots for 13 weeks. So we had saved all these sharps containers with all my needles over all the years, just because I didn't know what to do with them. So they just kept piling up. So we had 9 sharps containers full of needles, and we laid them out on our living room floor and just laid them out and counted them. I just started crying. Like, I was so emotionally overwhelmed seeing it. And, my husband holds me and he's like, what's going on? And I was like, I am so strong. Like,
yeah.
and I would not ever call myself a strong person. Like I'm kind of a wimp when it comes to things. Like, I hated needles prior to this, and not even just physically strong, like emotionally strong. Like, it just amazed me, like looking at it. And even so, it was 428 shots that I had done. And that's just a tiny picture, because we had, oh my gosh, like 5 surgeries. I'd been under anesthesia 9 times. I can't even tell you how many blood draws, ultrasounds, appointments. It just was like so overwhelming just to see it sitting on the floor. And like my first thought was like, you're strong. Like, holy cow, I can't believe you did that. Like, so that was kind of a great lesson to myself, to prove like, don't underestimate yourself. You can do more than you think. So that was good. Along with my husband, seeing that, because he was my nurse. So 428 times he gave me shots, because I could not do it to myself. So even from his point of view of seeing me have to go through all of that, it's almost harder being the caregiver a lot of times than the person getting care, because you feel so helpless.
My last question for you is, you've already given some, but just like final thoughts, advice for someone in a similar situation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff I've already said. Sign up for a therapist if you're that deep into it. It very much helps. Don't underestimate yourself, I think. Ask questions. Definitely advocate as much as you can. And seek out someone who's been through it, because I guarantee somebody. Don't be afraid to ask. Like, we recently had a friend who went through it, and we were texting each other constantly, and I was giving my advice and what I thought, and tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. And if you can use someone to help alleviate your stresses and your worries in this moment, try and find them, because it'll make a big difference in going through all of it.
Well, we did it. Thank you so much for being on here. I am so happy for you.
Thank you.
That's just crazy. I'm so glad that it worked out. You made it through. You did it. You're going to have a son.
Yes.
And you got you're in your house, your big house that you bought to fill with your kids. So
we're ready to fill it.
You're on your way.
Yes. I keep like thinking about these other 3, because we like know all their genders, and I'm like, it's happening. We're putting them all in. So I'm just going to be this like 45-year-old mom. It's fine. We're just
you're still going to be doing all those shots.
Exactly.
Just for the rest of the time.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. Well, thank you again for being on.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Thanks so much again to Dawn for being on the show this week. If you have a story you want to personally share on the show, want to be read on air, or a topic you'd like to see discussed, find us on Instagram and Facebook at JustAPersonPod, or send us an email at justapersonpod@gmail.com. We'll see you next Monday with another new episode.